Now that we can scrape data from websites, we need to learn a little bit more about how to work with strings, because the reality is that sometimes, even with all the helpful things something like Beautiful Soup can do, the information that we scrape might still be a bit disorganized, messy, and not in a format we want, or just not elegantly presented enough for the type of output that we want to print or send out to a file. So in this tutorial, I want to show you a bunch of different basic string processing functionality that we're going to be able to use to manipulate and work with our strings a little bit more directly. So let's dive in with number one. Number one here, let's learn about how to strip white space. So let's say I have some text here, and the text is, it comes in with some extra space. This is the message that comes in. And it has this extra text around it, so I print this text out, and on the screen, it's kind of offset from the side, and it also doesn't have any, it kind of has this extra information at the end, and I just don't really like this. So what can I do to this text to be able to fix this kind of information? Well, if I take my text and I run a strip command on it, print this out again, then I see that there's no difference in how it looks. And here's one of the things, I'll zoom in this a little bit. Here's one of the things that we really need to make sense of with strings, is they are, oops, I type it up here. ST. I want to have this trim at the very top here. Strings are immutable. Immutable means they cannot be changed. Be changed directly. I cannot change a string. I need to reassign the data to a variable. I can do this simply just by resetting it to the string itself, the same name. So I'm just replacing the contents, but I'm not allowed to just directly change it like I can sometimes with other variable types. Just this is not enough. I need to assign it to a variable. And again, the same one's fine. I could even make it a different one. Doesn't really matter. But you'll see here that this is the message that comes in, has none of that extra white space around it. That's been removed. Okay, a couple more options just in case they matter to you. What if I actually want it indented at the left, but I only want to remove the stuff on the right? Well, I can go rstrip to only remove the right-hand side things. And, as you might have guessed, I can run the lstrip to just prune the left side stuff off, leaving that extra information on the right-hand side. So I can strip away all the white space as often as I want to in this way. And I'll just leave it as this main way because we're going to use the string again in number two. In this case, we're going to replace certain content in a string. So what if this is the message that comes in? This is the message that comes in. I typoed here. I'm glad I did because I want to replace some information in here. And what if, well, we'll see an interesting case here. What if I want to take my text and replace some information in it? So what I can do is I can take text that I want to replace, and then beside it, I can replace it with something else. This is the message, and I want to say that instead. That instead. And let's see what happens here when I try to print out my text. This is the message that comes in. It didn't change anything because I didn't assign it to another object. But if I print this out again, we now see that the changes have been applied to a new string. That's totally allowed. I cannot change the string directly, but I can copy the data and that transform data into a new container, even if the same name, I'm just replacing the reference. And now I see this is that message that comes in. That was replaced both times because the and the, it gets replaced in both situations. What happens if I was to want to actually replace it only once? And the way that we do that is by adding a number as the third parameter in the replace. A 1 here would only replace the first instance. What if you want to replace only the second, the third, or the last instance? Well, this is a bit trickier because we don't have a direct way of doing it with the replace method. And this is an algorithm that if you need, I'm going to let you try to solve on your own. It's an interesting one. It basically involves splitting the message up into its individual words and then just accessing the slots that you want to in that new list to replace the information. So you only get the convenience in the order that they appear, unfortunately. But it is a way of replacing only some of the information. Okay, so I've now been able to say this is that message. Why don't I just change that to this to say this is a message that comes in. This is a message that comes in, just to make this a little bit clearer. So we've now seen this up and running. Rewind the video if you need a recap of that information, but let's keep on forging ahead here. Let's break long strings up into subsections. How do we do this? Well, this could be a part of your strategy for figuring out how to do the reverse of this, but what I want to do is basically take my text and I want to split it up based off of some delimiter. And if I just leave it empty, the delimiter is the white space in between the words. So if I assign, I'm going to call this all text, a different variable here, because I'm splitting it up into it. I'm going to print out my all text, and I now see that it's split into each individual message. Interesting. So I do have a way, I think we did this in the last unit, but here's a reminder of splitting it up. So I have this, the text itself, just notice here, hasn't changed. The message that comes in is not split because I can't change it directly. So this has, the text hasn't changed, but I've assigned the split into a new variable. This means I can leave this here, but the text is still the same for the next number. So keep that in mind. It's always important to remember that immutable strings, it's interesting how they work. What about case management? And I don't mean trying to like deal with troublesome students here. I mean, how do we actually manage the upper or lower case nature of these things? Well, I'm going to show you a few options. Let's print out our text here. And what if I assign text a new value where I go upper? Print this out. This is a message that comes in. So this is all to uppercase. Okay. And actually what I'm going to do here is just comment that out. I'm going to say text equals text.lower. See what this does. And it's all lowercase, just to show that this is really the case. I'm going to make this first one capitalized and run this again, and it's still lowercase there. So the whole thing became lowercase. Let's change this back, however. So this one here is all to lowercase, just to make it really clear. And I can set my text equal to, let's go text.title. Here's another one that we might want to see. What does this do? Look at every single string is capitalized, like a title of a page. So this will basically, comment this out here, capitalize every word in string. Cool. And let's set our text to be equal to text.capitalize. What does this do when we print it out? It just capitalizes the first string in that phrase. What happens, just out of curiosity, if I do this, new sentence, and I was to print this out here, it only capitalizes the first entry in the string. It doesn't assume grammatical structure of English. So just to make that really clear, it doesn't assume it, it just capitalizes first word in the string, okay? Not in the English grammar inside of it. And we also have this ability to do something fun in unique situations where we do a swap case. This is the message that comes in. What if I had, well, what if we do this first, actually? We're gonna do text equals text.title to capitalize the first letter. And now we see that if I swap case, it's all the other letters that are capitalized. Something interesting to think about here is what if I go text.title.swapCase? Can I chain these things together? Indeed I can. So I can just put all this kind of chaining together on one line if I wanted to. Interesting to maybe consider as well. Swap the cases. Kind of goes without saying, but we just want to make sure we understand it here. So we are inverting, maybe you want to say this here, invert the cases. Maybe you find some use for some of these different case management things to make you the printouts and the reports that you derive from your web scraping much more controlled and neat and professional. Could be really useful in some software that you write. Okay, how about something that you might find useful from time to time, which is to reverse the contents of a string. Maybe you need things to be backwards for some reason. I'll give you a hint. It would be very useful in solving this problem of replacing in reverse order. This reversal thing could be really useful for that type of an algorithm here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a reversed string. I'm going to set it to, well, what I'm doing here is I'm building a new string, because remember, I can't change the string. So to reverse it, what I'm actually going to do is a little extra piece of functionality where I'm going to create an empty string here, and I'm going to join to it the reversed text from above. And then I'm going to print out my reversed string. And you'll see that it's the sentence backwards. So this reversed method that I put the text inside is what actually does the reversing, but I need to concatenate it to an existing string. It can just be an empty one to actually kind of produce it as a string. So a little bit of extra functionality here. Maybe you'd find some use for it. Just kind of a curiosity thing for you to see as we're thinking about some string management. How about if we want to check if contents, if certain contents are in a string. So I want to see if there's information involved here. I'm just gonna, maybe I'll leave that up on the screen here. I'm just gonna comment it out for now. Oops, typoed. So how do I check if contents are in a string? Well, what I can do is I can just do an if statement check, a little bit like this. Oh, oops, okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna just check if our content is in text. So I'm gonna just check a string, what's the content of our string here? Let's just say the word message is in our text. This in keyword allows us to check for what's contained inside of something else. So I'm gonna check if this string is a substring inside of this text master string, kind of the meta outer layer of string content. And if it does, I'm just gonna print true. And I'll say else, this print false. And we'll just run this here and we'll see that it prints true because I have actually found message. What about mess? The word mess. Is mess in the text? It still says true. Why is that the case? Well, it's just a small part of the string. It doesn't care about it being a word or not. It cares about the order of characters. If I said MSES, a bit of a different order of these characters, it's going to say false because that's not the order of characters in it. So just be wary when you're looking for something in something else. It doesn't really matter in terms of the meaning to our English ear. It just matters if those characters appear in that order inside of it, for whether or not it's going to be printed as true or false. So just keep that in mind as you're working with that kind of strategy, if you're trying to look for information as you scrape it from the web. And finally, let's learn a bit about string slicing, how we can chop these things up into little kind of individual pieces and parts. So to work with this section here, I'm actually going to copy this text information down below here so we can just see it for a quick reference to make sure we're really seeing this clearly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create another variable called subtext that I'm going to print out after this, subtext. And what I'm going to do with subtext is try to pull out just a piece of the string information above here. So in fact, let's just kind of get rid of this extra white space, assume that we've sliced this, or stripped it, I should say, because we're doing the slicing right now. It makes the terms up in my head. We want to just get a portion of the string sliced down to size. And here's how we do this. Take my text, and in an array type reference, the element slot, I'm going to now put in two different numbers, so, and maybe sometimes one. I'm going to say 0, which means the start, colon, 3. And let's see what happens when I print this out. It says thy, T-H-I, which are the first 3 letters or characters in this string. 0 to 3. 0 is the starting point, the first character, and 3 is the ending point, but it's exclusive. So when we're doing this strategy, the first num is inclusive, meaning it includes it, and the second num is exclusive, meaning it doesn't include it. So it's 0, 1, and 2, the 0, 1, and second position. Now if I do, let's go 7 and print this out, this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It doesn't gather, slice out the 7th character. Notice there's no extra space at the end here. If I highlight over it, you can see there's no extra space there. So I can pick and choose the endpoint of this. What happens if I go way over 77? There's clearly not 77 characters here. Does it error? It does not. It just takes all the information that's there and kind of is forgiving. So luckily in Python, we have a bit of forgivingness going on in here. However, we don't just have to guess. If I want the entire string, I can simply just leave after the colon blank. It prints the whole message out. Blank means to the very end. So technically, if I was to go from 5 to blank, it's going to go, is the message that comes in. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Starting at the 5th slot, go to the end of the string. Is the message that comes in, is printed out. The reverse is also true. If I leave the start blank and put in some number here, then I take from the beginning to whatever this index is. This is, with a space after it, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, up until not including the 5th entry. Or 15 is just the first 15. This is the mess. So this should be 15 characters. Okay? And so we're able to see different combinations of information that we can kind of chip out. What if I want just the 11th, the 15th one? I just want this information, or maybe I just want this message. Looks like that's the 12th character at the start. M-E-S-S-A-G-E. That's 7. This should go to 19. Just the word message is pulled out. So I can extract just subcontents of this by setting the starting and ending element of the relevant string array that you might want to consider being kind of interpreted here. So we're now able to slice the string up into individual parts in different ways and store that subtext separately. So it's if you remember back to our web scraper here, when we pulled this data in, actually let's just do it again. I think I left all the information the same way as before. And we should be able to see this information pop up. But previously, before finding A here, I had this extra date content at the end. I figured out a strategy to use Beautiful Soup to remove it, but if I hadn't been able to do that, or maybe that wasn't possible, maybe the information just had this at the deepest level of Beautiful Soup organization, it was still stuck there, I could use a slicing technique to chop off the end and only gather up until near the end, and not including the date information. The algorithm would require a few pieces of nuance, but now you'd be able to do so because you have some of these strategies. So now you can remove white space, you can replace certain content with other content, you can split into subsections, you can manage all the cases in many different ways, you can reverse content, you can check if content's in a string, and you can slice strings up into different pieces. You have all the tools that you need to be able to manipulate string data that you pull and scrape from websites into whatever format that you want for your report. And I'll expect to see you using these strategies in the content that you are working with. See you in the next video for a few more tips on this upcoming project.